Welcome to the program, and a little bit different program this week. I certainly hope that you have been enjoying our series of interviews with some of the smartest people that we can find on some of the most important topics as we continue to fulfill our mission on this program of exploring big picture trends and issues that affect all of us and exploring them with some of the smartest minds that we can find. And we will resume that next week when Lisa Patel joins us on this program. She is a expert and founder of a company that is working through treatment options for rheumatoid arthritis, but other degenerative diseases, chronic diseases, using very innovative technology. And I think that's going to be a great interview. And I encourage you all to join us for that program. We will also have another conversation on medical innovation in 2 weeks with Lucy Jung. And so those are going to be two great programs coming up that will get us back into the rhythm of speaking with the smartest minds about the most important topics. But I want to take a break from that for this week in particular because it is Memorial Day weekend in the United States. And I know we have a global audience. Not everybody recognizes this particular holiday um, on the day that we do in the US, but almost every country in the world has some variation of our Memorial Day. And because it is meant to be a day of reflection and remembrance of those who served in uniform for the United States of America in one form or another in active duty and who lost their lives in the service of this country, I felt it was important for our program to pause for this particular occasion, this particular week, whenever you may download this show, even if you end up listening to this later in the week of Memorial Day, or if you listen to this show at some point in the future, and perhaps you get the opportunity to pause with me on this show, even if it's days, weeks, months from now. But I do think it's important that we just spend a couple of moments talking about this Memorial Day and the meaning of this day and the meaning of what it is to remember and how important that is for a society, how important that is for a civilization, for a people, for a nation, and why it's important that we do take that moment. Now, for those who are not from the United States, who don't know the history of Memorial Day, there are many tellings of this. Um, but officially, according to the Congressional Research Service, it is a day of reflection and remembrance for those who died while serving in the United States military, and it's observed as part of the National Moment of Remembrance, which encourages all Americans to pause at 3 p.m. for a moment of silence on Memorial Day. And here in the United States, because of an act of Congress, Memorial Day is celebrated on the last Monday of the month of May. And so this year that makes it May 29th, 2023, but it would be the last Monday of any month of May in any year. And the first of these was celebrated, or I should say, observed in 1868, following the Civil War, the American Civil War, which spanned from about 1861 to 1865, in which more than 600,000 service members, both Union and Confederate, lost their lives on battlefields across the United States. And this was originally recognized as Decoration Day. It was a day for the war graves to be decorated with flowers and wreaths and other symbols of remembrance. Of course, flowers would be in bloom in the month of May, and it was a sensible time to do something like that. The practice was pretty widespread on a local basis at that time in the 1800s following that war, and it became official and it became something that the U.S. Uh, made more of a formal observation over time. And of course, we've had many evolutions of how we recognize that day. Certainly, the world wars uh, changed a little bit about what the meaning of the day was because it had been a day up to that point where so many of the lives lost could be attributed back to that civil war. And there were a couple of other conflicts along the way. But then with the world wars, we saw huge numbers of additional casualties. And increasingly, it was actually Armistice Day and later Veterans Day, which we celebrate in this country, in the United States in November, that sort of started to take a bigger sense of importance, let's call it, for recognizing all members of the armed forces, including those who had passed away. But Memorial Day remains to be a unique holiday. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk specifically about why I think it's important, and from what I've heard from so many people in this country. And I felt it was very important because I know we have a global audience to share a perspective of just one American, that I am, with those from around the world who try to understand America's customs and cultures and how our people think. Um, I think any civilization anywhere, any people, any nation, no matter how big or small, remembrance is a critical part of what makes us a people, what makes us a society, what makes us a cohesive unit. And the service of one's country is a unique form of service, distinct from any other public service that there can be. Not that we don't recognize the incredible sacrifices of local law enforcement, for example, or first responders, medical professionals, teachers, people who work in public service in both white collar and blue collar jobs. All of these are critical. Every one of these public servants deserves our respect, and any of them who would ever lose their lives in the line of their service deserves an enormous amount of gratitude. They and their family should be remembered. But service in the U.S. military, it truly is in the name of and in the defense of the ideals of what this nation is. When you don the uniform of this country in whatever branch and whatever capacity of those branches that you do it, it is understood around the world to mean that you are a defender of America's ideals. And though there are many great nations in the world, there perhaps is none that has ever existed on the foundation of a set of ideas, ideals, and principles. Individual freedom and liberty being among the most important of those for Americans. And we are taught, and we grow up in this country to recognize that freedom is not free, that it has a price, because there is always someone, somewhere, who wants to take that individual freedom away from all of us. And we must have a force willing, trained, capable, able, and willing to stop those forces of tyranny from infringing upon the God given rights of freedom that we as Americans believe that every human being is entitled to. Now, everything I just said is a bit of a platitude, of course. Everything I said is a bit of an ideal. But that is what makes our country unique. And we as Americans believe that it makes us unique, that we are founded on this ideal, though we don't always live up to it, and though we sometimes fall short of it. The ideal, nonetheless, is that freedom is the natural state of a human being, that we are meant to be free, and that there must be a force that protects us from those who wish to enslave us. Those who lose their lives in the protection of that fundamental right, they deserve a special place among all the public servants who have lost their lives in the line of duty. Because whether they died on the beaches of Normandy in the first wave of Americans to liberate Europe from tyranny, whether they died on our own soil, particularly the Union troops who died in the name of protecting the United States ideals as a single individual unit, but also those who died simply believing that they were defending freedom in their own name from a different adversary. Whether they died in Korea, whether they died in Vietnam, whether they died more recently in Afghanistan, Iraq, or in special operations around the world, including those who died at the hands of fellow soldiers in tragic events, even in friendly fire events. The point is, if somebody lost their life while wearing the uniform of this country, they were defending freedom to their last breath. In order for us to be a nation that lives up to our ideals, it is important that we remember those because we understand that this ultimate sacrifice is the only thing that allows us to continue to have the kind of freedoms that we have. We understand that without a number of individuals willing to risk their lives for the protection of others, most of whom they will never meet, most of whom they will never know, without that, we can't possibly ever fulfill our mission as a nation and as a country and as a people. We have great respect for all of America's allies who also laid down their lives at freedom's altar. And so, while this Memorial Day is specifically for those of us in the United States to recognize ours, we also pay our respects to those from other nations who fought alongside our sons and daughters, our brothers in arms. And though their nations celebrate them in different ways and on different days, we know that when freedom was threatened, America had many great allies, and among those, many people worthy of our recognition and our celebration. For those of you who have family members who lost their lives in the service of this nation, however they lost their lives, we remember with you on this Memorial Day. And for those who have had recent losses, for whom the grief is still fresh, we not only pray with you, but we want you to know that our thoughts continue to be with you. We want you to know that the nation is truly grateful, no matter how it may feel, how alone you may feel from time to time in dealing with your loss. Know that there are more than 300 million of us in this country who, in one form or another, are in debt to you for the sacrifices that you have made. And for all of those who are still serving, who have lost brothers and sisters in arms, we can't possibly truly understand what you have gone through, but know that the vast majority of us, we have you in our hearts, our thoughts, and we will do everything that we can to make sure that the freedoms that we have are exercised in ways that honor the lives of your fallen brothers and sisters. My last observation on this Memorial Day is not a new one, but for those who are not familiar with the United States or our customs and traditions, Memorial Day is very much viewed as the kickoff to our summer festivities. It's a 3-day work, 3-day weekend, a break from our traditional 5-day work week here in the U.S. And many Americans choose to travel for this weekend and spend time in celebration with family, with friends, spending time away from home, traveling, and enjoying a very nice time of the year for the vast majority of our country. Cities like New York and Boston and Washington D.C. It's the first really warm period of time for the year after a long winter and a sometimes up and down spring. Beautiful cities like Chicago and Minneapolis and Detroit and even places in our western United States start to experience the full benefits of late spring and early summer. So it is very much a time of year where we're looking forward to spending time with family. And because we are the United States, we commercialize virtually everything. It is a weekend of retail store sales and car sales and mattress sales and all kinds of silly things. And many have observed that the holiday seems to have lost so much of its meaning, and that we are losing a piece of ourselves if we do not take appropriate time to remember and reflect on all the freedoms that we have and the price that it cost our nation and our families and our people to be able to have this. Now, as I've talked to veterans and families of those who have lost service members, many of them don't have any real great issue with this being a holiday weekend and people viewing it in a very positive way. They have simply asked, and something I would like to convey today, for one thing and one thing only, that at some point in that day or that weekend or throughout the course of the year, that we simply take the time to reflect and remember, because that is the point of the holiday. It doesn't mean you have to spend the entire day in solemn prayer. It doesn't mean that you must forego a family barbecue or an outing with friends or a vacation on a beach. All it means is that while you're doing those things, take a moment. Take a moment to remember those who laid down their lives for freedom's cause. A moment, a minute, 5 minutes, perhaps before you sit down to a meal with your family. Perhaps take a moment to recognize those who lost their lives in service of this country. Perhaps in the morning before you get your day started. Perhaps you can visit the graves of loved ones of yours who may have lost their life in the line of service. Perhaps you find a way to give back to your community in some act of service for your church, maybe for the local VFW hall, the Veterans of Foreign Wars we have here in the United States. Or maybe you simply find some small way to recognize your own freedom and celebrate it and help someone else celebrate in their own way. However, you choose to do it, everybody that I have spoken to on this topic has basically said the same thing, which is that they don't want to rain on anybody's parade. They simply want us to continue to remember. And it is through remembrance that those souls who laid down their lives at freedom's altar can be remembered forever. Because the truth is, the only way we achieve immortality is through remembrance. And if anybody deserves to have that immortality, if any names deserve to be remembered long past the time that most of us cross over and go away, it is those who were in the service of this nation, who gave an oath to defend it and its principles and its cause. They uniquely deserve to be remembered, remembered forever for their sacrifice. And it is through remembrance that we keep their memories alive. And in doing so, we keep the very essence of our freedom fresh. And we keep it going and we keep it strong. And so, in honor of that, we spent this time today remembering. If you listen to this program, that means that you've remembered. And we're remembering together. If there are any particular names of those that you wish to remember, happy to post those on my social media accounts. You can reach out to me at info at brianjmatos.com. I'll be happy to post those names and have others remember with you and with us. But I hope you'll join me again next week as we move into the next series of our interviews with some of the smartest minds that we can find on the most important topics in our world. And I encourage you to take the time over the next few days, the next few weeks. And again, if you're listening to this show months from now, just take some time to remember those names, remember those individuals, remember the sacrifice that they made. And in doing so, you'll have honored them and honored their freedom. Until next time, thank you for listening. I hope that you have a wonderful holiday weekend, if this is your holiday weekend. And join us again next week for another episode of the Brian J. Matos podcast. And between now and then, I encourage you all to stay curious.